So, welcome Toby Hagerott to the Secrets to Nature podcast. We are so
Welcome.
excited to have you here.
Happy to be here.
And I have to tell you before we get started, you are the second guest we've had that we were referred to by my very dear friend Mindy. And the last person she connected us with was her cousin Nikki, who actually ended up announcing on our podcast that she was pregnant with twins. And that's how her whole family found out. So if you have any big life news that you'd like to share, apparently this is the place to do it.
No, sorry, I don't have any big life-changing moments at the present time.
I'm just kidding. That's totally fine. So you are a farmer.
Yes.
And before we get into your farm and your practices, I want you to tell us what inspired you to take this career path.
My background is in landscape architecture, and I moved to Delaware for my master's in sustainable design. Went and pursued that. Just by happenstance, I was volunteering on a CSA farm down in Odessa, Delaware, and they were shutting down shop, and a developer was looking for a small farmer, and so I took the leap and went from there. I bought the closing farm's equipment and infrastructure and started my operation at that time with the stuff that I had just purchased.
Wow. So
Cool.
how familiar were you with the equipment you had just gotten? And
Pretty familiar. So
Okay.
it wasn't crazy, and I have a background working in landscape design and private gardens and commercial greenhouses. So it was just taking production to a whole nother level, from just a small garden to acres, and just started from there. I felt it was important and important enough to take that leap to do, and had faith that it would work out. And 5 years later, I had 80 shareholders in my CSA, or in my farm. A CSA is a subscription service to fresh vegetables during the season. And from there, eventually moved to my current job, where I am a full-time manager for a school district's farm, but I still run my operation. After I get done at 3 o'clock, I switch hats and run my operation in the afternoons and weekends.
Wow, that
So
sounds like a
you
lot of
kind
work.
Yeah, it can be.
so you kind of took like gardening practices on a smaller scale and just accepted the challenge of making it into a much bigger scale.
Yeah, and it helps that I had volunteered on operations that were at larger scales. So I knew the growing practices and had that experience from not only volunteering on the CSA that I purchased their equipment, but also previously when I was working in a professional office and volunteering at another CSA in another location. So I had prior experience by volunteering, but had a vast background from growing up and mother's garden, private gardens, that type of thing.
And what does CSA stand for?
CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. It's how farmers, small farmers or local farmers, you buy a share in the farm in the springtime, and then that gives the farmer the budget to run their operation or start their operation up each spring. And then that farmer now has an obligation to pay your share, pay you your share of vegetables that you purchased, whatever is fresh and available, for a period of time. In Delaware, here in Delaware, it's typically between 20 and 22 weeks, and can range from, for a full share, which is about a 5-gallon bucket. A 5-gallon bucket is a good reference size. Everyone knows what a 5-gallon bucket looks like and can visualize it. But about a 5-gallon bucket of vegetables is a full share. And typically a full share for 20 weeks runs about $600. So you do the math, that's about $30 for fresh vegetables each week. And when you have, say, like I was doing 80 shareholders, some of them were half shares, some of them were full shares, but that gave me a good working budget at the beginning of the year to buy my seeds, buy my equipment, buy all the supplies I needed to start the farm up, and have everything ready and going for when the CSA, I had to start paying vegetables back to the shareholders.
That's really cool. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Me
So
either.
it's a good working business plan for beginner farmers. Someone that's
So
just
like
starting.
I'm sorry, this is
Go
like
ahead.
the blueprint for like small farms.
A lot of small farms start out with a CSA. But even
Okay.
large farms like Pfeiffer Orchards, which is down in Dover, Delaware, one of the larger operations in the area, they have an 800 member CSA.
Oh, wow.
Gotcha.
Is this like
So
a countrywide thing or just a state thing?
it's across the country, from coast to coast. It was started Booker T. Washington days and then became more modern in the early 80s.
Cool.
So it's kind of like, so you called it like a subscription,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounds kind of like a community.
It helps build community. You have like-minded people supporting a local farmer, getting that connection with their local farmer, so that
Yeah,
you know where your vegetables are coming from. You know the person
totally.
that's growing them. You
Mhm.
know how things are done. You can ask that
Totally.
person questions. So it really builds a community and a relationship.
Yeah, that
So
sounds like a sweet deal.
do you do like meat and dairy, or is it kind of just produce?
So when I no longer run a CSA because I have a full-time job, and I do run a CSA with the schools over the summer, but when I was running mine, I was helping support other operations. So I had a goat cheese share, a bread share, an egg share, a chicken share. And so the goat cheese was each week they got a block of goat cheese that was from a local operation. And so I became the center collaboration or collective for all these other people, the bread, the baker, the person that the farmer that had all the chickens. And I would collect, they would, customers would pay for their egg share or their bread share. And I would collect that money and then pass that money directly to the baker or the cheese maker, or even every other week, people would get a fresh 4-pound chicken that was raised 20 miles away.
I love it.
Yeah, that sounds really great.
So
And it doesn't sound expensive to be a patron, so it just seems like such a great alternative to the grocery store.
so there's some farms will allow you to pay quarterly or whatever, so it's not such, especially for young families or families that can't pay that 600 right away, installments or something like that. A lot of people do that, or half up front, and 3 months later when the CSA starts, you pay the other half. So
Gotcha.
it really depends on the farm and can be really tailored. Some people will want every other week, and some farms do that. So
That's cool. I feel like I noticed such a difference between like vegetables from like a small farm compared to like mass produced or stuff or coming from overseas or another country.
when things are stored, they lose flavor, they lose some of their quality.
Mhm.
We have to store things. I mean, we want things year round. But stored items, minus probably winter, some crops, winter squash tends to get sweeter. Some apples gain complexity if they're stored. But other things like fresh carrots, oh my gosh, that's the biggest vegetable that I notice a huge difference between fresh carrots and stored carrots. There's just nothing beating fresh carrots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
And
know.
I feel like, sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
My dad grows tomatoes, and I definitely notice a difference. They just taste better. I don't know why.
The biggest reason is a lot of our vegetables today are grown for storability and transportability. So the strawberries that you may grow or tomatoes you grow in your backyard are not good transport. They won't transport well, so they are not grown by the large farms. Now, large agriculture is needed. We need crops year round. We need the big greenhouse, a hothouse tomatoes if we want tomatoes. But that's a modern diet now, is everyone wants accessibility to produce all year round, the same thing all year round. I want my, before 50 years ago, you wouldn't get strawberries all year round.
No.
You only had them in the spring.
And when they're in season.
In season. But now we want everything in season. We want our grapes year round. So grapes come from Argentina. Is that sustainable? Is that I want my organic grapes from, like I said, Argentina. Well, great, they're organic, but your carbon footprint to get them to you isn't sustainable. So there's an argument between organic and sustainability too that isn't addressed very often.
And I bet most people don't even know what season stuff is in.
Not
like
anymore.
I don't know.
Like what's in season in your area.
Yeah.
Because it depends on the area too.
Yeah.
And a lot of that. Go
sorry,
ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, the average person probably has only ever tasted something that has been stored, you know?
I see that a lot working on the educational farm that I work and manage. I have people that have never had a fresh tomato off the vine. They've only had ever store-bought tomatoes.
Like, I'm trying to think if I've ever had a fresh tomato off the vine. Probably not.
Yeah. So there's things like that people need to be re-educated on. I don't think will happen too much right now, but if society shifts and changes and we have to rely more on our local community instead of the global economy, you're going to see that as things become more expensive, there's going to be less availability to the global things.
I'll never forget when I was in Southeast Asia and like I was at a hotel and they gave us papaya and I kind of thought it tasted like throw up, like the aftertaste. And then we went to this little village and the guy like literally cut it off the tree and gave it to us and it tasted completely different. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I'm fascinated by the idea of like organic versus sustainable and how there's a difference. And I definitely want to dive into that. But before I forget, I want you to tell us the name of your farm or I know that you're not really doing is it CSA?
I'm not doing CSA any longer, but I still sell at a farmer's market on the weekends. So I'm still growing things and doing that. So my personal farm is against the grain farm because I do things a little bit different. Not that I don't like my breads and wheats and things like that. I just am against the grain a little bit. And then my full-time job is managing and running Penn Farm for the Colonial School District.
Gotcha. So I understand, and I actually, we learned this from a previous interview that we did, but getting a certification for your farm to be organic is like, you have to like jump through hoops and it's difficult to get. Is that correct?
That is. There is a lot of paperwork and a lot of record keeping that goes with becoming USDA organic. I can use organic practices, but I can't use that term organic unless I become certified by the USDA. Now there is another certification that I use called Certified Naturally Grown. that uses the USDA organic standards, but uses peers and local people to make sure that you're growing organically. So I can be certified naturally grown. I will have an extension agent or a master gardener come over and go through the form to make sure that I am following organic practices. And I was certified naturally grown at one point until I had to move my operation, but and just never went after it. But going after USDA organic and becoming certified organic not only is a lot of paperwork, but it can be very expensive. Now the USDA has and the state governments have programs to cost share and help with that expense, but it can be costly to do, especially for a small operation. So a lot of small operations will do I'm naturally grown in their spiel when they're selling product, or just talk to the customer. No, I don't use any synthetics. I only use organic fertilizer and organic sprays. So knowing your local farmer and having that conversation with them is important, and asking those questions. And most of your local farmers don't have a problem, especially if they're growing it. They're proud of what they grow.
Totally. And if they have a problem with you asking questions, that might be a red flag.
Yeah. I have customers, because I do purchase locally from other farms to make sure I have a variety of things that I may not have, because I don't have a lot of fruit. I don't have a lot of fruit on my farm, but I feel it's important to allow my customers to have access to fruit. But I've had customers ask me, "Is this organic?" I'll tell them, "No, that apple is coming from such and such a farm. They are integrated pest management. They don't spray unless they have to." And me having that relationship with the other farmers is just as important to my customers, because I can have that conversation and I'm well informed that I know what I'm talking about to my customers about the product that I'm selling.
Totally.
Yeah, I had no idea that it was so hard to get that certification. So like I was looking up organic farms near me where I live, and like there was none. So I just assumed like, oh, okay, everyone uses pesticides, I guess. But now I know to like look further into it.
Yeah, so there are alternative certifications. The biggest one used is certified naturally grown. There's the non-GMO verified, but that's just for genetically modified product, not necessarily if they are doing natural organic methods. Here locally, I only know of 2 certified organic farms. One is Flying Plow out of Rising Sun, Maryland, and the other is Pre-Appy Gardens down in Galena, Maryland. That's around here. That's it. Now, Coverdale Farm, which is run by Delaware Nature Society, and other farms, mine, Penn Farm, we grow naturally, but we're not certified organic.
Gotcha. And you're located in Delaware?
I'm in Delaware. I'm in outside of Wilmington. There's several farms in our area, but my farm, the school's farm, and I would say Bright Spot Farm are probably the larger independent or smaller farms. They aren't like big orchards or anything like that. We're just strictly vegetables rather than like Highland orchards or I don't know, North Star orchards and stuff, where they have orchards helping support the vegetable growing.
Yeah, one of our other guests, we were talking about this with her, and I found out like there's a natural farm only like 10 minutes from me that I had never heard about. It's crazy.
And when you like Google it, it doesn't come up.
Yeah. Because I typed in organic farm, so of course it's not gonna come up. But
yeah, and then there's other farms Jersey, there's a great one, Moods, just across the bridge from me here.
Oh yeah.
Great you pick orchard. Oh my gosh. They aren't
People
organic.
go like pumpkin picking there.
Yep.
I feel like.
Yep. They're a great family operation. You pick very minimally sprayed, only spraying if they have to and when they need to. So there is big advantages to being transparent. And now with inflation and with the cost of chemicals, the old perception of farms using all these chemicals and spraying everywhere and stuff, farms can't afford that. The cost of chemicals has gone through the roof. But the science of the chemicals have changed also. So back in the day when they were using a gallon of chemicals per acre, the chemical, the makeup or the makeup or how that chemical is made has changed. The science has changed. Now the science and the equipment allows them, instead of a gallon, they're using a quarter of a cup of the chemical for the acre. So the science has changed. That gone are the days of, oh my gosh, I'm just going to bury it in chemicals. So there, science and technology have helped us.
Good.
Yeah, our local farm put up like a fence around their whole thing. So I wonder if that was a way to like deter wildlife without pesticides.
It is. It's one way. We use a 6-foot electric fence to keep the deer out of all of our lettuce and stuff here on the school's farm.
Yeah, I think that's probably what they did.
Yeah. Deer are a big problem in urban environments.
Yeah.
So I do want to get more into being organic versus being sustainable. And I know you said one great example is buying organic food that may have shipped overseas, which is not sustainable. So if you have any other examples of how something can be organic but still be harmful in a way, I'd love to hear about it, just because it would probably be really eye-opening.
So that's probably the biggest example of it, something being organic but not being sustainable because it's transported. It doesn't even have to be from another country. If you're transporting organic blueberries from California or Canada or somewhere just to have them because the season moves north. So we have our strawberries from Florida, and then they move to California and then up the coast as the season progresses and then starts over back again. Organic isn't necessarily sustainable because of the transportation costs. And we forget to calculate those transportation costs, those fuel costs in our choices of when and what we buy. There's plenty of fruit options, apples in the wintertime that are local that are much better choice than buying the organic apple from California or vice versa. Even your hothouse tomatoes here locally and the organic, the hydroponic lettuce is going to be much more sustainable than getting lettuce from Dole from Arizona or something like that. And you're going to have less of a risk of contamination too. That's another big thing that happens with our big operations. And the government's trying to curtail that with the new produce safety regulations that big farms and even smaller operations have to abide by. It's not just the USDA anymore. It's the USDA and the Produce Safety Alliance. You have to pass a year, you have to go through a training and follow these rules, and they come out and test your farm and make sure you're doing this. Especially, even for me, I'm exempt. I'm a small enough farm. I don't produce enough money from my farm to follow those. But if there's an outbreak of I don't know, listeria in cantaloupe, and I'm growing cantaloupes that year, well, they can come on my farm see make sure I'm following the practices, and find me if I'm not, even though I'm exempt from that. So there is a crackdown. The USDA is becoming more strict with our food. And so buying local, buying not necessarily organic, but having that local connection and understanding where your food comes from becomes more and more important when you don't know where it's coming from and there's a big outbreak. And well, you could be in the hospital dead 4 days later because you ate the wrong lettuce.
Yeah. I just saw the lettuce recall too in Acme.
Yeah.
It's the kind I eat. So I was like, oh, God.
So going back to sustainability and or organic, when we think about sustainability, we think about, oh, hey, no plastic and reusable and recyclable. But also sustainability is looking at the life cycle and how much energy is used to create an item or get an item to the end consumer. So when we're thinking sustainability, we're looking at how much energy it takes to grow an item, how much energy it takes to take care of that item, be it going and driving the tractor through and taking care of the weeds. So that's fuel there, the care of the tractor, and then harvesting and transporting. So that's more energy used, energy both in labor of humans, but also energy used in natural resources consumption. And then getting it to the distributor, be it Cisco Foods, their big warehouse or wherever, and then or national grocery distributors, and then distributing it from those warehouses to the grocery store, and then you transporting it to your house.
Yeah. That sounds gross when you think about all the places it's
I know.
A lot of hands handling your food before it gets to you.
Yeah.
And that just makes it seem that much more appealing to go to a farmer's market.
Yeah.
And we're seasonal, so farmers markets typically in our area are May through November. So, what do we do in the meantime? I still got to eat. And that's where you have to make those educated choices at the supermarket. Supermarkets are pretty good about supporting local and trying to do local. ShopRite here in our area tries to support local. You'll see local farms corn or peaches and stuff in the grocery store.
Oh, nice.
But you also have your small little co-ops and small little grocery stores that even rely on or source locally even more than the bigger grocery stores. So here in Delaware, we have Newark Natural Foods co-op on Main Street in Newark, but you also have the little shops like there's a little shop in Trolley Square, Honeybee Kitchen, that she supports a lot of local, but she's just a little place. But you come in with your tray of tomatoes, she'll try to buy it from you if she has a need for tomatoes when you're growing a home garden. So
that's cool.
So we can't forget some of those small little local groceries that do try to support local even more so than the larger grocery stores.
Yeah, there's lots of farmer stands in South Jersey.
You guys, South Jersey, oh my gosh, it's refreshing to drive through Jersey and you're like, oh, farm stand.
Yeah.
Whereas in
I guess
Delaware,
we take it for granted.
Yeah, in Delaware we don't have that.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
The girl we interviewed where we were talking about all of this with, actually, she told us about Potato Homestead. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. That's a new one for me.
That was a farm she recommended to us.
Well, I'm gonna have to write that down because I always like to know in the know. There's also Harvest Farmers Market co-op up in the Hockessin area, and Jansen's a little higher end. grocery store, but they support a lot of local too.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah, the big one near us is Duffields. I think they're pretty big.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That one. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's usually where I go because they have like a big store.
I really want to get into the most harmful practices of, I mean, we've kind of been discussing it, but modern day farming, the big corporations and like their biggest issues. I know there's probably a really long list, but I do want to get into that for sure.
Yeah. So biggest issue and most glaring issue is the centralization of our food. And that really showed up in the pandemic when we have
Yes.
3 processing plants for all the pigs in the United States. Smithfields, the big centralization of our food has posed some big issues. And that's not just meat it showed up with because there's only so many processing facilities, the large ones, but it also shows up in our grain and everything in the central states. Gone are the days of the farmer having a couple hundred acres. It's big companies that own a couple thousand, tens of thousands of acres of corn that run the market.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of scary.
the centralization of our food, especially here in the United States, but across the world, is scary in that manner. Because if they're doing something wrong, they're not doing crop rotation, taking care of the soil. That has slowly changed. There's a lot more crop rotation, a lot more education going on, but there's still farms out there that year after year are planting the same crop, and all they use the soil for is a matrix to hold the plant up. There's no nutrients left in the soil. And so it becomes dirt. Dirt is dead, and soil is alive. And
have you seen Kiss the Ground?
I haven't seen that one yet. No.
It's all about exactly what you're saying about how it's not soil anymore. It's just like dust, basically, and how that is like the root of modern day farming and its issues. And it's just so eye-opening. And what you're saying right now is just it's juicy.
It's really good.
Yeah. I have a little saying, dirt is dead. Get with the soil, dirt is dead. Because the big farms and stuff, they're all about the end product. So they, not necessarily this year because of inflation, but when prices of chemicals and fertilizer were cheap, they could just pour the chemicals on, pour the fertilizer on, and still make a profit because they're so large. And smaller farms can't do that. And so there's been a big push here locally with Future Harvest CASA and Pennsylvania PASA. Those both stand for Chesapeake Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture and Pennsylvania Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture. Big movement for soil health and taking care of the soil, and with crop rotation and cover crops. And so that's been the big push recently in the last couple of years.
That's good. Yeah, I know it's pretty bad in the Midwest. It's like a lot of drought and everything. And it's only making it worse.
And so when soil is dead and you have dirt, there's no resilience in the soil. It doesn't hold a lot of water. It can't because there's no organic matter to hold the soil particles apart, allowing this water to penetrate and get in and stay in the soil. It just hits the soil and washes away. And so the resiliency of the system is harmed because of their practices. The organic matter in soil holds things apart. And when that is gone, why I say organic matter is the fuel in the soil. It's what the microbes eat to break down and create the nutrients. And when you don't have any microbes in the soil, when you don't have any organic matter, when the fuel's gone, you don't have any microbes, so the soil dies, and then you're left with dirt. And when there's no organic matter in the soil, everything gets compacted and hard. And when that happens, water can't penetrate. You don't have any air in the soil anymore. And so the three components of dirt is organic matter, air, and the soil particles. And that's what creates soil, the dirt particles and those two other components. Water, it's nice to have the water, but you can have soil, the components of soil without water. So you need organic matter to hold everything apart and to keep everything running. It is literally the fuel of the system.
And soil versus dirt, like soil is alive. Like there are living microorganisms in the soil, and once they're dead, it's dirt, right?
Yep. The thing that is on your clothes is dirt. We call it dirt. You're washing the dirt off because it doesn't have the organic matter and stuff. But soil is alive and living and has fungus and microbes and organisms. It's a huge interconnected system, and I'm a novice at that information compared to some people. I would love to learn more. Do I have time to learn more? No. I leave that to the experts, and I will have my layman's education, and at least know I have to have organic matter and responsibly take care of my soil as best as I can to make sure it stays alive. And that comes with also tilling. If I am tilling the soil over and over again, every time I'm introducing gas, which turns out to be oxygen, every time I am working up the soil and adding oxygen to the system, the microbes go crazy, eating up more of the organic matter. And then I'm left with less fuel in the soil for the microbes to use. So every time I'm cultivating or working up the soil, I'm taking away the reserves that I have built up or I have in my soil for the microbes for later. And that is where minimal till comes in. So now a lot of farms are using no-till systems. So the technology has caught up with some of our education or has developed from our education and our learning that the implements on the back of the tractor will literally cut a slit in the soil, drop the seed behind it, and push the soil right back over. So they aren't working up the soil, tilling it up with cultivators and breaking it all up. So that's why sometimes you'll see a cornfield sitting there with nothing happening on it if they haven't put a cover crop down. And then in the spring, it's all soybeans, but you can still see the corn stubbles. They've rotated crops, which is great, and have done a no-till seeding of soybeans, which is also great. So the three main crops for our commodity crops here in our region is corn, soybeans, and wheat. And you'll see that rotation happen quite a bit for the big commodity farmers, which is great. I mean, it's what we need on the Delaware Peninsula here for the one of the other large commodities coming out of Delaware is chicken farms. We're kind of known in southern Delaware for chicken farms. And what do chickens eat? They eat the corn and the soybeans and the wheat. And so we kind of are a little bit self-sufficient in that manner with those three products for our chicken farming here in Delaware, the chicken houses.
And so all those three crops are grown on the same field throughout the year?
Yeah. So probably the largest puller of nutrients from the farm or from the soil is going to be the corn.
Okay.
The giver to the soil is going to be the soybeans. They're going to add nitrogen and give back. And then the wheat is kind of in between. It takes a little bit, but breaks the cycle with some of the pathogens. It's kind of a rest crop in between the other two crops. It soaks up and absorbs all the excesses of, say, fertilizer or something that the farmer may have added, and locks it into the wheat. And then the following year, they'll come back and plant the corn in what's the rotation? It's corn, soybeans, and then depending on if they have time, they'll plant wheat in the fall, and then they'll plant corn again in the spring, because they'll harvest the wheat early in the springtime.
Okay. And also I wanted to ask, can crops grow in dirt, or once it's dead, it's like nothing can grow?
It is a structure to hold the roots and plants upright. And it becomes more and more of a challenge to get the seeds and things to grow if it is just dirt. So you get more and more cultivation to work the soil up and at least get it soft enough to, you can't use some of the equipment any longer with no-till because the ground's so hard. So more cultivation has to happen in order to get the seed in the ground. And it starts feeding on itself to be worse and worse. And I'm hoping that as education and new generations come along, that practice becomes less and less as education happens of our farmers. But we have to remember, most of our farmers are in their 65s and 70s. And I have a dog here that he brings a bone or a rawhide to me, and I have to go hide it with him. And that is his thing, and he is wanting to do that right now. And so you may hear a little whine here until he gets frustrated with me. So sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you go hide it. You go hide it.
You can go hide it for him if you want.
No, you go hide it. You go.
Hide it for him. It's okay.
Yeah, you can go.
No, he knows. He knows. He'll go and hide it.
That's so funny.
So you said that education and technology is evolving, but so you seem hopeful and optimistic. Are we? So we're not headed in any sort of direction where like our Earth was just going to be covered in dirt? Because it seemed the documentary that I watched, The Kiss the Ground, made it seem like that's definitely a possibility.
It is a possibility in some countries where we don't have that education happening. Okay. So where the big companies have bought foreign land and are growing products. We, as a large industrial power after World War II, there was what's called the Green Revolution. And we headed off World War III with our hybrids of rice and stability of crops to other countries through our science of hybrids and technology. After World War II, we helped keep a third World War from happening by stabilizing the food in other countries. So that's a much more involved history, but if listeners want to look it up, it's the Green Revolution. And that's when we got a lot of hybrid wheats and rice, not GMO, but hybrids. And that's how we kept World War III from happening, was because we stabilized the food. Now, big corporations have bought third world country land and introduced other crops, GMOs or factory farming for shrimp or fish. And there are companies that are ecologically sound and do farm fish and other things sustainably. But there are, how do we feed a majority of our population? Well, not necessarily with the greatest of practices. And so there are farmers that are pushed off their land by the bigger corporations. And that's happened a lot in India. And those corporations don't really care about the land. They will use it up and move somewhere else and buy more land. And they're not held accountable. So, and we, as our buying practices, we aren't looking sometimes closely enough of where things are sourced and what's in our food. Our processed Western society is known for highly processed, highly added to foods. There was a study years ago in a book I have, I think it's called Food Atlas. It's a little infographic book, but it was very informative. That's what it's there for, infographic, right? And it had a great information on we in America, for texture, shelf life, color, taste, I think those are the four main ones. There's a fifth one that I always forget off the top of my head. We consume about 5 pounds of additives every year that are not regulated by the FDA. The only time an additive is regulated by the FDA is if it shows harm. So they can add whatever they want as long as there's no harm shown. Until it shows harm, then it's regulated.
Wow.
So our yellow number 5 or whatever, because it's in such a small quantity, it's not regulated. That food additive, that starch, or that monos, well, not MSG is a bad one to use, but all the odd long names, the triglyceride, blah, 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 that is used to stabilize our food. Until it shows harm, it's not regulated. So whereas Mountain Dew is not the same Mountain Dew in Europe, or the ketchup that we eat is not the same ketchup in Europe, because they regulate those food additives much more stringently than we do here in the US.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. I see that on social media a lot. People being like comparing ingredient lists to the same product. And it's like scary.
Yeah.
And people are always saying, well, like they defend it and they're like, oh, well, you have to eat like a lot of that specific chemical for it to like be harmful. It's like, okay, well, no one's going to eat it all at once, but like a little bit through like years and years. Like, do they know what's that doing to us? Probably not.
There was I just recently saw it. It was a news report that we have hit a chemical tipping point in the world. There's more and more chemicals being used, but there is no study and no, because there's so many chemicals and they're so widely spread used, and they're in such small amounts everywhere in our water and everything, that we have possibly hit a chemical tipping point that all this cocktail of chemicals, we don't know how they're interacting and messing with our ecosystems. And so what's going to happen with all the antibiotics and stuff in our water? How much does it really break down? They say it breaks down, but is it breaking down, or is it interacting with another chemical that's in our water or our waste or in our soil? And so because we have chemicals we have fungicides, we have insecticides, we have fertilizers. How are those all interacting? Are they killing us? I mean, they're finding microplastics in our food and we're consuming that food. So it's kind of scary.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that, and my dad and I have actually talked about this, I think that mental health has probably been an issue, as long as humans have existed. But do you think that the rise in mental health issues could have anything to do with the drastic change in the way we eat food in the last 50 years or so?
I think there could be a correlation drawn there, and also with the rise of people being allergic to things. Is it our awareness that has and our education and our science that has allowed us to recognize these things much more? Or is it because of our diet and our environment around us hurting us both, as you say, mentally, and as us as both physically too, with our intolerance to, has all this gluten intolerance always been there, or has it been our hyper awareness of it? Or is it because now we've had GMOs for so long? Is that the problem? Or is it because all the chemicals we've had in our environment? So is our environment harming us, or are we becoming hyper aware of my digestive system being irritable after I eat a lot of bread? Or is it just because I've just, my body can't handle all that bread? So it's there's an argument to be made there, and I don't know for sure. It's just, it makes you think, okay, what are we doing? Is it our environment affecting us as human beings?
Yeah, the first thing they say, I don't know if it was Kiss the Ground or Food Inc. It might have been
Lexi,
Food Inc.
Can you pause
What?
for a second? I just need that arm thing, the podcast arm, just fell apart on me. So
That's okay.
it's literally in pieces.
I'll
I
pause
need
for a
to like
second.
move. Okay. Well, that's what happens when you spend $15 on Amazon.
Well, that's, I mean, a little bit off topic while we're waiting is back after in the 1940s, when our economy changed to a consumer economy, just a side note here, the perceived lifespan of products changed. So instead
I
of
believe
that,
it.
instead of that refrigerator lasting for generations and you're using your grandma's refrigerator, now you're having to get a new refrigerator every 10 to 15 years because it's cheaper to buy a new fridge than have it repaired.
Yeah.
And not being able to repair things is a big movement also.
So, oh my gosh, I know. And since no one's fixing things, we're just getting new things. That's definitely
consumerism.
The opposite of system. Yeah, that fits in so perfectly. I was just about to say that, like my question was that in the beginning of, I think it was Food Inc., the first thing they say, like the first line is, we have changed the way we eat more in the last 50 years than we have in 5,000 years. And that applies to all products across the board, not just food. So that's so interesting that you just brought that up.
We used to, even 100 years ago, preserve everything that came out of the backyard garden, and everyone had a garden and had space to grow. But because everyone moved off the farm and moved to the urban environment, technology pushed us there. We didn't need to rely on our local farm anymore to produce things because the big farm did it. So we needed less people to produce the same quantity of food, not necessarily quality, but we needed less people to produce it because technology increased. We had bigger tractors. We no longer had the horse. I mean, think back 100 years ago, we were still Model Ts, using the Model T to drive around, the little Ford Model T. We still had lots of horses. Even in New York, there's a great book, The History of the Humble Pig from Snout to Tail. And there was actually a riot in New York in lower Manhattan because they forced all the local pigs that people would keep for their community. The little block would have a block pig that they would grow. or they would have pigs taking care of all the scraps in the sewers and stuff. Is that hygienic? Is that great? Not necessarily, but there was a riot because they had got all the pigs out of Manhattan, out of the city. There used to be, you hear about the cattle drives from Texas, from the West down to Texas and all of that. There used to be pig drives from the South farmlands into the city to the slaughterhouses along the rivers and in the big cities. So
I've not heard of that.
So our environment has changed. We've changed it because of our technology and our science. So we need less people to produce the same amount of food. And that changed things.
It's so interesting when you read reviews for products and someone's like, oh, I used to have a blender from this brand and it lasted 20 years and I just got this new one and it broke after a week. And it's like, yeah, they do that on purpose because they just want you to replace it every 5 years.
Yep. And I'm thankful, like we have a toaster oven that we really like, and it's just the two of us, so we don't need a big oven very often. We have a low convection toaster oven, but it's Cuisinart. Cuisinart has a lifetime warranty on their products. There is one little selector switch on the past two, the same switch that's gone out. Most people just toss it. I've called Cuisinart up twice. Hey, I need a new toaster oven because your product broke again.
Yeah.
Okay. Just this is the old, my grandma, she used to do this a lot with a blender. All they wanted is a picture of the cut plug. They didn't want the product back. They just wanted to see that you cut the plug off the old one and they sent you a new one. So
they wanted proof that you physically couldn't use the old one anymore.
Right. Yep.
Oh
and so God. I've done that with 2 Cuisinarts now, and I haven't paid the $150 twice now because thankfully they still have a lifetime membership, lifetime warranty on their product, but it's one flaw in their product that they haven't fixed. And so I hate to do it, but I've got to have a working product too. So consumerism has been fueled by the one economist who said he here in the United States anyways, after the war, and I have to memorize this because I use it a lot. We will now become a consumer society. And
Sounds
that's where
right.
it's led. Yeah. And that's where it's led. We now only produce things to be consumed. We are going to be Wall-E.
Do not say that. You can't say that to me. Oh my God, you just can't. Ugh.
It's scary though.
I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know.
But I have faith that, and you're seeing it more and more in the younger generations, not necessarily my generation, because I'm a generation, I'm really aging myself here. I'm Generation X. I'm a Generation Zennial because I was the last generation that had analog. So we had clocks, and my first computer was second grade is the first time I saw an Apple computer. And so, but I think there's been a big shift. Yeah, virtual and working from home is great. I think much more of our society is going to be run on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But that frees up a lot of time for other things. And there has been a shift for people I want more land. I want a bigger house because I want to be able to do things. Been a resurgence of canning and preserving food. And it gives me hope as a middle-aged person that the next generation might do something a little bit better than what we were doing and have more education in preserving the environment and taking care of the environment. And there's the education of knowing what has been done. And my hope is that education and that learning changes things for the better, so that when I'm in my grave, that the environment that I'm leaving behind for the next generation is better than what was left for me. And that's where the shift needs to happen from sustainable, where we're just staying the status quo, to regenerative. We were building up and making it better for the next generation.
I love that so much. Like, sustainable is great, but regenerative is even better. And that's what our goal should be.
Mm-hmm. I think more people are getting into that. Definitely. I follow a woman that does canning on TikTok. I don't even can, but I just think it's interesting to see how she does it. And yeah, it's like a smart way. You just buy everything in bulk when it's in season and you just have it for the whole year. So it's pretty genius. It just takes some work.
Takes some work. You're not having some company put it in a tin can or a jar for you. You're doing it. You know what is going into your food, and you're getting it at wholesale prices, where instead of paying $1 for a great one is a cucumber at Walmart, $1 a cucumber, or 2 for 50 cents, you're buying a whole bushel, which is a crab. A bushel is one of those big crab containers, baskets of crabs. That's a bushel. You're buying a whole bushel for 18, which is 75 cucumbers. So buying in bulk from your local farmer, he's happy to get rid of the product, because, oh my gosh, how many times have I had product left over from farmer's market, a basket of green peppers or something. I'm like, how am I going to get rid of this? And then sometimes a person will come on, hey, can I buy that off you? Sure, here, take it. That goes for tomatoes when they're in season locally. You can buy a box of fresh tomatoes for $20, 25 pounds of tomatoes for $20. They may not be perfect, but they're processing tomatoes, and they're perfect for sauce, marinara, passata, canning them whole, freezing them. People forget you can freeze them.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said to circling back for where we began, supporting your local and knowing your local farmer and knowing their practices.
I need to start freezing more fruit, because like the kind you buy in the store has like no flavor for smoothies.
No flavor.
Strawberries so
in the winter have no flavor.
I know.
They've been bred for their red color and their transportability, not for flavor.
No.
So
are there even any nutrients left?
So that's been a study that's been happening too, is how nutrient dense are our foods. And there are some studies that have shown that the nutrient density in our foods has decreased because we've increased the shelf life or transportability of it. But there's no longer any taste. There's no longer, and with that taste is the nutrients. Where do we get our taste from? It's from the nutrients in the food, the vitamins, and the essential stuff that we use to grow and sustain ourselves. Why do I want to eat cardboard when I can eat a frozen tomato that tastes like summer?
Yeah.
The amount of times I've gotten blueberries and they have zero flavor, and I'm just like, I can't even eat this. It's disgusting.
I'd rather have a sour blueberry that's in season than a non-tasting blueberry from somewhere else.
I love the sour blueberries, but the ones that have no flavor, no.
Yeah.
So you're really good at kind of answering my questions before I ask them. But my last question that I had was the things that you want the young generations to know to keep the planet healthy. And I'm thinking of making the title of this episode just sustainability versus regenerativeness. I don't know the word that I'll use yet, but I think that was like such a great takeaway from this episode. So
for words to the wise for the young generation, the generation
please
coming up.
Share.
Support local, know your farmer, and practice sustainability where you can, and so practice sustainability and strive for regenerativeness or regeneratability where you can. Regenerative is really hard to do locally and at a small level, but if you can push or buy hemp products or products that are made from bamboo and stuff that have a higher regenerative quotient than say wood does, and our paper forests where it's poplars and fast growing wood that isn't really great for anything else but processing. I mean, that's just one great item, but strive for regeneration, because our sustainability that we're practicing now is keeping barely the status quo, if that. We're not at 100%. We may be at 75 with the whole sustainability mantra that's been happening for the last 20 years, 25 years. We need to get to regeneratability. We need to get to that regenerative state where we're making things better. We're doing things more than 100%. We're adding things to the soil. We're doing practices that build up the soil and make it better for younger generations. The soil that I have on my farm now is better 5 years later than what I started with because of the practices that I've used.
Because you're using it.
Yep, I'm using it responsibly. I'm putting things in the bank. The soil is my bank for later on. And so I'm putting my savings in the soil. And if I keep that soil healthy, it's going to feed me. It's going to feed later generations. And if I'm building and adding to that bank, I'm leaving something better for the next person to come along. And hopefully they will continue to build on that.
That is such a fantastic note to end on.
Yeah, that's great advice.
We only have 6 minutes left, so we do have to wrap up, but that was such a beautiful picture that you painted for the very end. So thank you very much.
I'm hopeful for the future.
Please tell everyone your website, where they can find you, where they can buy your produce.
So I am at the Newark Natural Foods Co-op on Sundays, which runs from May through November, through the Sunday before Thanksgiving. So we don't have a year-round farmers market around here. And then the Penn farm, which is the Colonial School District's farm, we have our CSA and market during that same window during the summers, during the growing year. Against the Grain Farm can be found at againstthegrainfarm.com or atg.farm. And then Penn Farm, look up Colonial School District, Penn Farm, and you'll find us. We're all over the place.
Thank you so much for being on Secrets of Nature. It's been an absolute pleasure. And maybe we'll have you on again.
Yeah,
I would love it.
you.
This has been great. Thank you very much for having me.